Edmund Kemper was an American serial killer active between 1972 and 73. With an IQ of 145, he used his intelligence, social skills, and calm personality to avoid suspicion for years. At 15, he shot his paternal grandparents and was sent to maximum security at Atascadero State Hospital. There, he studied how psychiatric evaluations worked by scoring tests for other patients. He used that knowledge to manipulate doctors into believing he was rehabilitated. After his release, Kemper became known as the co-ed killer for targeting female college hitchhikers around Santa Cruz, California. He picked up victims, drove them to isolated areas, murdered them, then brought their bodies home. After dismemberment, he often discarded the remains near Loma Prieta Mountain. But unlike impulsive killers, Kemper carefully planned everything. He studied police methods, understood forensic evidence, and controlled crime scenes to avoid leaving traces. But rather than laying low, he spent time with off-duty officers at bars, buying drinks and listening to discussions about the investigation. Some officers even asked for his thoughts on the co-ed killer, unknowingly helping him avoid capture. No one suspected him. But eventually, he killed his own mother and her friend Sarah, and drove all the way to Colorado to give himself time to think. He was disappointed that no one was hunting him, so eventually he confessed everything from a phone booth. Police thought it was a prank, so he confessed twice. He later said he turned himself in because the original purpose was gone and he couldn't handle it anymore. Many believe he would never have been caught if he hadn't confessed. Kemper was convicted of murdering 7 women and 1 girl. He asked for the death penalty, but received 8 life sentences and remains imprisoned at California Medical Facility. Joseph James DeAngelo, later known as the Golden State Killer, was an American serial killer and former police officer responsible for 13 murders, dozens of sexual assaults and burglaries across California between 1974 and 86. Despite the scale and brutality of his crimes, he avoided capture for over 40 years through meticulous planning, discipline, and his law enforcement background. He monitored police radio scanners during his crimes, allowing him to track officers' movements in real time, leave crime scenes timely, and learn which of his own methods were being flagged by investigators. He carefully studied homes and neighborhoods before attacking, disabled exterior lights, left doors and windows unlocked for later entry, and even moved weapons to deny victims self-defense. He often escaped police on foot or by bike and operated across 15 California counties, at a time when departments rarely shared information, making connections between cases difficult. What made DeAngelo especially dangerous was his patience and restraint. He avoided clear patterns and took extreme steps to prevent fingerprints or DNA evidence. But one of the biggest reasons he stayed free was that he stopped killing once DNA technology became more advanced. Realizing future crimes could expose him, he abandoned the spree entirely. For decades, investigators had DNA from his older crime scenes, but no match in FBI databases. But via genetic genealogy, a then new method where investigators compared crime scene DNA to public ancestry databases to build a family tree, they eventually narrowed down to DeAngelo in Citrus Heights. Detectives secretly collected discarded items from his trash, and the DNA matched the older crime scene evidence. DeAngelo was arrested outside his home in April 2018, ending one of the longest manhunts in American history. Many believe he would have never been caught without modern genetic tracing. In 2020, he pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. John Leonard Orr was a fire captain and arson investigator in Glendale, California, who became one of America's most prolific arsonists, setting more than 2,000 fires while using his insider knowledge to avoid suspicion for decades. He targeted crowded retail stores like fabric and home goods chains during busy Saturday hours. He used a simple but effective delayed ignition device, a cigarette rubber banded to matches, inside a paper bag filled with accelerant. That gave him 11 minutes before the fire started. This method became his signature and downfall. One of his deadliest fires was the 1984 Olds Home Center fire in South Pasadena, which killed 4 people, including a 2-year-old. Years later, Orr even returned to the scene as a consultant, effectively helping investigate his own crime. ATF investigators eventually noticed many suspicious fires along routes tied to arson investigator conferences near Highway 99. When they mapped the fires against conference attendance, Orr's name appeared on every single one. But his real downfall was pure ego. He wrote a novel called Points of Origin, featuring a firefighter who set fires for fun using the same cigarette delay device. A store fire in the book exactly mirrored the Olds Home Center fire. He even submitted the manuscript to publishers while investigators were already watching him. The partial fingerprint that ended it came from one of his devices recovered at a 1987 fire in a Bakersfield craft store. The fingerprint had sat in evidence for years until investigators finally compared it directly to Orr's fire department records and got a match. Orr was questioned in 1989, but he stayed calm and cooperative, but gave them nothing. He continued setting fires for 2 more years, but was finally arrested in 1991 for being present at another suspicious fire. He was sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years. Rodney Alcala, known as the dating game killer, was an American serial killer who claimed to have an IQ of 170. Alcala posed as a photographer, offering fake modeling opportunities to lure and isolate his victims. He also constantly moved between states like California, New York, and South Carolina, frequently changing names, disguises, and aliases, which made it difficult for police to connect his crimes. He repeatedly manipulated the justice system. After assaulting an 8-year-old girl in 1968 and fleeing, he was eventually arrested in 71 but pleaded guilty to lesser charges, avoiding harsher punishment and being released after only 34 months. Alcala's calm and charming personality helped him blend into society. He even appeared on the TV show The Dating Game and won as a contestant after passing background checks while actively killing. But eventually he got careless. In 1979, 12-year-old Robin Christine Samso disappeared in Huntington Beach. Witnesses said a man had approached girls on the beach offering to photograph them, and after police released a sketch, Alcala's parole officer recognized him. Alcala was arrested in July 79 after police found a receipt for a secret storage locker in Seattle. Cops found it full of trophy photos of victims and jewelry. Later, DNA tied more cold cases. He was convicted of Samso's murder and sentenced to death. He was ultimately linked to 9 murders. Investigators believe the true number could be over 100. While on death row, Alcala filed lawsuits against the California prison system over a slip and fall accident and being denied a low-fat diet. Alcala died of a heart attack in 2021 at age 77 while awaiting execution. Dorothea Puente, or the Death House Landlady, was an American serial killer who murdered at least 9 tenants at her boarding house in Sacramento between 1982 and 88. She posed as a harmless elderly landlady and specifically targeted elderly and mentally disabled tenants, people who could easily be dismissed as having wandered off or died from natural causes. She built trust by acting like a sweet grandmother figure, wearing vintage clothes and baking cookies for neighbors and even the police. Once tenants moved in, she drugged and poisoned them, then buried their bodies around the property, often covering them with concrete. This delayed discovery since investigators needed strong evidence before getting permission to dig. At the same time, she kept cashing their social security and government checks, forging signatures and intercepting their mail. She often forged letters to victims' families to make it seem like they were still alive or traveling. When police began investigating in 1988 after missing persons reports, a former tenant revealed key information, leading detectives back to her boarding house, where they found the first buried body. Puente fled but was later tracked down and arrested at a motel in Los Angeles after being recognized. She was sentenced to life without parole and died in California prison in 2011 from natural causes. Charles Sobhraj was a French-Vietnamese serial killer and con artist who targeted Western tourists along the South Asian hippie trail during the 1970s. He is believed to have killed at least 20 people. Known as the Bikini Killer and Serpent, he was described as charming and attractive. He posed as a gem dealer or drug trafficker, befriending travelers before drugging and drowning, poisoning, or strangling them. He stole victims' passports, creating a rotating set of false identities that allowed him to move across borders. In 1976 in New Delhi, he and his accomplices tricked a group of French students by posing as tour guides and giving them poison pills disguised as medicine. The plan failed when some victims realized what was happening, overpowered him and alerted police. In custody, he faked illnesses like appendicitis to be transferred to hospitals, where he would attempt escapes or drug guards. He also bribed officials. While held in India's Tihar jail, he famously organized a birthday party in 1986 where he took out guards with drug-laced sweets, walked out of the front gate, but was later recaptured. After years in jail, he eventually retired to France, but yearning for attention and overconfident, he returned to Nepal in 2003, where he was recognized by a journalist in a casino and the police arrested him while gambling. He was convicted of 2 murders and sentenced to life imprisonment. In 2022, he was released due to age and health reasons after serving 19 years and was deported to France. Scott Lee Kimball was an American serial killer active between 2003 and 4. He is confirmed to have murdered at least 4 people, though investigators believe he could be linked to at least 21. What made him especially dangerous was his ability to manipulate law enforcement. While in jail for fraud and forgery, he conned the FBI to recruit him as a paid informant in murder-for-hire cases. This deal got him released early. Once free, he used his new status to commit murders while supposedly helping the FBI. Kimball targeted people he knew, acquaintances, friends, and even an ex-girlfriend. After ending them, he stole their identities, used their credit cards, and forged documents to make it appear they were still alive and traveling. He dumped most bodies in extremely remote wilderness areas, such as Colorado's Route National Forest. He fed the FBI mostly useless or false information, and even inserted misleading clues into case files. His downfall began when he stole over $55,000 from an optometrist's account in Colorado by forging checks to his beef company. When police investigated the fraud, they linked him to several missing women. In March 2006, the FBI tracked him to California and attempted to arrest him. But Kimball fled in a dramatic car chase before running out of gas near Salton Sea, where he finally surrendered. During plea negotiations, he failed a polygraph test and refused to reveal the location of one victim's body, causing the deal to collapse. He was convicted of multiple murders and sentenced to 70 years in prison in 2009. He remains jailed in Colorado. Terry Peder Rasmussen, known as the Chameleon Killer, was an American serial killer active from the late 1970s to 2002. He is confirmed to have killed at least 5 people across multiple states using dozens of different identities. Rasmussen was a master of identity theft. He stole and memorized other people's documents, constantly changed names, appearances, and occupations, and moved frequently between RV parks while working as an electrician. When pulled over by police, he could recall every detail of his new identities. This allowed him to evade capture for over 30 years. He is most notorious for the Bear Brook murders in New Hampshire, where 4 bodies, a woman and 3 young girls, were found in barrels. He lived with Denise Bowden and her daughter in 1981, killed Denise, and then took the child with him. In 1986, he abandoned the girl in California and was imprisoned for child abandonment. After parole in 1990, he vanished again. He resurfaced in 1999 under another false identity, where he began a relationship with Yansun Jun in California. Jun disappeared in 2002. Family and friends grew suspicious because it was completely out of character. Police investigated and discovered Rasmussen was on parole from his earlier child abandonment case. They arrested him for a parole violation. Investigators then searched the home and found John's mummified, dismembered body buried under hundreds of pounds of cat litter. Rasmussen was convicted for her murder and sentenced to life. He died in prison in 2010 from lung cancer and pneumonia. His real identity was only confirmed in 2017 through DNA testing. Lawrence Bittaker was an American serial killer with an IQ of 138 who, alongside Roy Norris, formed the Toolbox Killers. Bittaker reportedly had a photographic memory and could read entire books in hours while retaining the information. Together, the pair kidnapped, tortured, and murdered 5 teenage girls in Southern California in 1979. Bittaker avoided capture through careful planning and logistics. He bought a cargo van designed with no rear or side windows and a sliding side door that allowed victims to be pulled inside quickly without drawing attention. Bittaker and Norris scouted isolated fire roads in the San Gabriel Mountains. They even cut locks on private gates and replaced them with their own, so they could access the areas without interruption. Instead of immediately preying on victims, they spent months doing practice runs, abducting and photographing hitchhikers to refine their routine and test if they could stay undetected. They also tried to blend into normal traffic by carrying out abductions at night or during quiet afternoon hours while regularly changing apartments and locations to avoid patterns. Their downfall came from Norris himself. He bragged about the murders to another ex-convict he met, who quickly informed police. Norris later cooperated and led them to the victims' remains. An FBI profiler later described Bittaker as the most disturbing person he had ever profiled. Bittaker was sentenced to death in 1981 and died of natural causes in 2019 while on death row. Norris died in jail in 2020. Mike DeBardeleben was an American counterfeiter and serial killer known as the Mall Passer for distributing counterfeit bills in shopping malls. He's confirmed to have killed 3 people but is suspected in many more murders, though he was never convicted of any homicide. Investigators considered him one of the most versatile and dangerous criminals in American history. He spent nearly 2 decades traveling the country committing crimes while using fake $20 bills across 44 states, constantly moving from mall to avoid patterns, plus using disguises and fake teeth. To get to his victims, he often impersonated police officers to pull over women on highways. Using at least 26 aliases and no permanent address, he moved through society almost like a ghost. FBI profilers described him as one of the best documented sexual sadists since Marquis de Sade. After his arrest, investigators discovered hundreds of photographs, audio recordings, and trophies connected to his crimes. His capture was almost accidental. In 1982, after repeatedly passing fake bills at the same mall one too many times, police distributed sketches to store clerks and instructed them to report anyone using suspicious $20 bills. This eventually led to his arrest in Maryville, Tennessee. Only after his arrest did the Secret Service uncover evidence tying him to kidnappings and sexual assaults. In court, he represented himself and even forced a victim to listen to recordings of her own abuse while questioning her, accidentally revealing details only the attacker would know. He was convicted on multiple federal charges and sentenced to 375 years in prison. He remained the main suspect in several killings until his death from pneumonia in 2011 at Federal Medical Center in Butner. Harold Shipman was an English doctor believed to be responsible for 250 murders over 3 decades, making him one of the deadliest serial killers in history. With a reported IQ of 140, he used his medical authority and deep understanding of the healthcare system to hide his crimes in plain sight. Shipman mainly targeted elderly women, administering lethal doses of diamorphine before certifying the deaths himself as natural causes. As a trusted general practitioner, he rarely triggered suspicion from families or coroners. He also routinely encouraged relatives to cremate victims, destroying forensic evidence. Using his office computer, Shipman changed patient histories after their demise, creating fake records that made victims appear seriously ill beforehand. He also manipulated death certificates and cremation paperwork to keep everything looking legit. But in the end, he got sloppy and arrogant. His downfall came after the death of Kathleen Grundy, whose will suspiciously left around $400,000 to Shipman while cutting out her own family. Grundy's daughter, a lawyer, realized the signature was forged and contacted the police. After exhuming the body, investigators found traces of diamorphine, and Shipman's fingerprint was discovered on the forged will. He was sentenced to life in prison, never admitted guilt, and said the accusations made no sense. In 2004, he hanged himself in his cell. Edward H. Rulloff, later nicknamed the Genius Killer, was a 19th century polymath connected to up to 5 murders. A self-taught expert in languages, law, medicine, and invention, he was a true criminal mastermind of his era. In 1845, Rulloff bludgeoned his wife Harriet to death with a pestle, and is believed to have poisoned their infant daughter before dumping their bodies in Cayuga Lake. With no bodies recovered, he was only charged with kidnapping and largely beat the case. He spent the next decades living under aliases, committing thefts and robberies while continuing his scholarly work. He escaped custody multiple times. But his final downfall came in 1870 during a botched jewelry store burglary in Binghamton, New York. Rulloff and 2 accomplices shot and killed a store clerk. While escaping the scene, Rulloff himself was the only one who made it across the river, but was captured the next day. A local judge recognized him from the old murder suspicions. Rulloff was convicted of first-degree murder and publicly hanged in 1871. His last words were, "Hurry it up, I want to be in hell in time for dinner." After his death, his brain was removed and preserved. It weighed over 1,700 grams, the second largest on record, and remains on display at Cornell University.